So let's get started. And Irene, I believe you're here to attend, but not to privilege the floor. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, just listening in.
All
I
right.
think
And
you're doing it all right.
all right, not seeing anybody else, we'll say there's no privilege of the floor. Minutes. So at the last meeting, Will and I were here. Barb wrote the minutes. Will and I weren't at the meeting, and Adam and Brad were at the meeting, weren't at the meeting. So we didn't approve them. So I have heard no objections about them. Brad, do you have any objections to those minutes from that meeting? Okay, so hearing now, we're gonna approve the minutes from the April 25th meeting. And then I did send out minutes from the April 24th meeting some time ago.
June 24th.
June 24th. In those minutes, I mean, but more particularly in a formal document, I'll show you guys later. I have made the adjustments that Barb suggested about making sure the things that were defined in the zoning law are capitalized in our recommendations and all that sort of stuff. So that change was made in the minutes as well as a document I'm going to pass around a little bit later in the meeting. So you guys don't see that, but you trust me that I made that change. Are there any problems with the June 24th minutes? Now, you weren't there. You looked them over.
Fine with me.
All right, so we'll take those as approved as well. All right, Michelle, anything to say from the town board end?
Well, I mentioned that you.
Sorry, time out. Could you take a few, you don't have to take anything detailed, but like any action or vote that we take or any really important thing that Michelle happens to say, I'll take notes too. But it's like when I make a presentation, you don't have to write down what I'm saying. It's more, oh, you're writing device. I have to keep, if without a pen in my hand, I can't think.
I might have a pen in the car.
Yeah. All right, forget it. I'll do the minutes. Don't worry about it. There's not going to be a lot this meeting. Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Michelle.
So I mentioned that there might be changes to the zoning law, suggested changes, and everyone agreed that you could. We would be happy to see them at any time, and I forget who, probably Mark, wondered if you would like to make a presentation at a board meeting about these suggested changes.
Sure. Okay. I can do that. I mean, I've written it out. I mean, they're mostly related to the work we just did on this, manufactured home siting law, park siting. Sure.
I thought people thought it might be helpful. It doesn't have to be very long.
Yeah, no, it won't be. But it does raise the question. I don't know if you recall this whole discussion, you weren't part of the board yet. In terms of the adult use law, there's a collision between what the zoning has set up and the various buffer distances set up in the town's existing law, such that it would be extremely difficult to impossible to actually locate one. And if someone wanted to, the town would lose on court challenge almost certainly. That's a ball of, worms or whatever the board may not want to get into. I'll probably bring that up as well then, but sure.
We decided to just let it go, but you can bring it up.
Yeah, well, let it go because we weren't, I didn't want to amend zoning just because of that. And we may want to still kick the can down the road a ways. I fully understand that. But I'll bring it up again, at least people can think about it.
So I guess just let us know which meeting you want to present at. And are you thinking the next meeting? Possibly?
I could probably do that. Again, I think we're pretty much going to be done with this here. And it was more that what I had heard from you was that there was, some thought of amending the zoning law, going through it again with a few things in mind. We have these things. Did the town board have some ideas of its own of things that they want to reopen it for?
I think there might be, I'm trying to think, maybe some changes to the subdivision law. So they basically said, yeah, you should just, introduce these changes and there's like no time not to do it. It's okay.
Right. Okay,
so
that's great.
The next town board meeting is August 6th.
Okay, that's actually probably good because the one after that I will be out of town probably. So I will, for now, however, the subdivision law is not part of the zoning law. We kept it separate so far. Only site plan went into the zoning law. So that could be amended without reopening. But okay, cool. Well,
so
I will send Mark a note saying, sure, I could make a quick presentation on the 6th.
Okay, that'd be great. Okay. Otherwise, that's the only thing I have to report.
Okay. All right. So then we will turn to the manufactured home park law. So I don't know, Brad, if you had a chance to review what was done last meeting in the minutes.
Yes,
Okay.
last meeting, but I didn't have a chance to review the email you just
Yeah,
had, like
oh.
at 4 in the afternoon.
Yeah, well, I didn't expect anyone to. So this is the text of that, which is basically what's in those minutes, just written up a bit, tiny bit more formally.
I've got it.
Okay, for handing to the town board. But the main question is, having read the minutes, you guys weren't there, we made these decisions, but nothing's all that formal here. So if there was any decision we made that you had a question or objection to, this is the time to hash it out again in committee. But to go, the basics, the existing mobile home park law is basically obsolete, and we recommend it is just be rescinded and thrown out. And instead, we have so much more available now in terms of site plan, and subdivision review and a multifamily development section of the zoning law that we're going to lean on those instead and simply add a few provisions. So we sort of formalized, we've all been talking about that, so I formalized that decision. So there was a mistake in the zoning law that referred to special use permit for multifamily structures. So this is a correction, to that. And then the things we wanted to add basically were that we all know there's this operating permit. We all know now that there's this operating permit issued by the Town County Health Department. Nobody, so to put that mentioned in the laws, in the zoning laws, so that everyone knows that it's there. Also, we all know now that the town of Caroline actually has a permit that is required for installing a manufactured home. Who knew? So we put a mention of that in there. And then the last thing, this is what engendered some discussion, was the requirement of skirting. And again, this is only for a manufactured home in a manufactured home park. And so the use is a commercial use in some sense, though it may still devolve upon the owner of the manufactured home to install and pay for that skirting. Skirting is not just aesthetic, it has some energy advantages. So we decided to go ahead and require that. That requirement was in the original law, and there's debate of, do we want to require that or not? So that we decided, yeah. And then things like manufactured home park, manufactured home are indeed defined in the zoning law already. No need to change that. And because of this permit required by the town, there's a section that deals not with commercial, like the multifamily houses, but just individual houses. And so we add that, the mention of that requirement there again, just so everyone is aware that it exists. Not anything we're adding. The one thing, again, that we are adding, as we saw it in various town laws, and I can't remember what was in the existing mobile home law. There was a little bit, I think, but is a requirement of all multifamily housing developments to have some sort of recreation community area if they're above 10 units. So we went ahead and said, yes, we think that's a good idea. And the final point was, again, probably would happen anyway, but just add a note in site plan that if the development is involving a manufactured home, that they have to plan for that in terms of the road widths and turning radii, et cetera. Hopefully the review board would be on, would know, but again, it's just something you mentioned so that it doesn't get missed. So those were the decisions we made at the last meeting. And today we're going to talk about flood zones. So
Just a comment that your title line should be manufactured.
yeah, let's see. Okay, sure. Always good to have a proof with you.
Every detail.
No, that's great. All right, so then in terms of flood zones, again, so the existing town's mobile home park law says can't do it in a flood zone. I poked around a bit, and New York State doesn't say that. And New York State says, if you're going to flood zone, just build it to these standards. And so, as I wrote in the note to everybody, in keeping with essentially the fact that that's how we treat other construction, that we are allowing it in flood zones, is we have a flood zone protection protection law that says you have to make sure things are this high or whatever. So we have all those standards in a law. We basically are state standards that all the town just adopts language the state has developed. And the town has defined flood hazard areas. We've adopted the FEMA maps. And we've had the principle of trying to treat manufactured homes like other stick-built homes. So I'm gonna recommend that we not incorporate that provision which said you can't do the flood zone. In other words, we're gonna allow them in a flood zone. And so that's my proposal, and this is open now for discussion of that point.
I think the one question would be, can mobile homes be built to the standard of the state regulations for flood zones? Because like a stick built, you say, oh, well, you can build it up to this high. Well, could when you think about a mobile home, are you going to drive it then up on a ramp of some sort to be elevated? Like how would
Well,
that work?
the state seems to think so, because because it says, if you're doing a manufactured home in a flood zone, you have to follow regulation notice 322, whatever. And inside there, not only are there all the normal things, there's another paragraph all about mobile homes that say, and this would have to be true about the foundation, et cetera. So again, on the assumption that some engineer did their due diligence and those requirements are sane and reasonable and protective. And probably, but it's not a given.
Sure. Sure.
But I can't second guess that, but there are standards that have been written that are manufactured homes are supposed to be able to comply with.
Sure.
According to the state. So,
Okay.
Also reasonable.
Yeah.
okay. So then, okay. Then the question becomes, do we need any language in the zoning law or anywhere else that says that, or do we just not say anything? Which I think would probably be my opinion. But again, in other words, it'd be language like, if a manufactured home is being placed in a flood zone, it must meet, applicable state standards.
Yeah.
Right? That's again, we don't say, other houses have to too, and it applies whether or not you say it, but it is not uncommon to say things like that. So
So the zoning law is silent on building anything in a flood zone?
Yeah, pretty much. Let me remember now.
Don't we have some sort of riparian area?
Well, that's different than a.
No, I know,
flood zone,
the riparian areas section is written such that it would apply to multifamily developments as well as single homes, correct?
Right, it's all building.
Any building, okay. So my concern with if we said about manufactured homes, if you build in a floodplain, you've got to follow the state, is that then we're silent on any other sort of structure. And so then I think we have to say about both or about all.
I mean, I think when you take a look without, that, the town has a flood damage prevention law. And I would expect the zoning law makes reference to that. I just don't know exactly in what section and because it's,
Okay.
So therefore, what does it apply to?
Yeah.
We could look into that. Obviously, I just don't want to take the time and mean to do it, but it's a relatively quick thing of just search, and
Right.
find.
Right.
And I'd be happy to check on that.
Yeah, so yeah, just to be clear, I think either we're silent on building in the flood zone for all types of buildings, which may be what it is now, or we say, all types of buildings of this sort need to, residential buildings, whether it's commercial buildings, I don't know, that's, I guess, up for discussion, but if we say any type of residential building, then we have to say all types of residential buildings. Otherwise, you get into the problem of, oh, well, they said that only manufactured homes have to do it.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. If I were a betting man, I'd bet that there is a reference to the flood damage prevention law and the zoning law. I just don't.
I don't remember.
So it may be that, again, that at this point, it's moved. It is mentioned there. It's going to apply to everything and we won't worry about it. And if that's the case, we're good.
Yeah.
And it's okay. So I will look for that. Okay. And then we're done. I don't know any other outstanding issues on the manufactured home park stuff.
No, your emails have been very comprehensive.
Well.
But good,
Yes.
I'm not complaining, I'm not complaining, I mean, I think, Bill, you're a very thorough guy, I appreciate it.
Well, it is from experience that like the minutes, for example, I do the minutes, no one ever looks at the minutes, but they're a way that helps me make sure, oh yeah, we did decide to do X or whatever. And otherwise, I've been through many meetings, I have no clue at the end. So yeah, after a few, that's just a year or two, I said, okay, we're gonna be careful. So thank you. All right. All right, so the next thing I think the planning board is going to turn our attention to is the solar siting law, which was passed in 2021, or thereabouts, maybe 22. Anyway, not that long ago as some of these things go, but in terms of the solar field, long enough ago. And so the initial main impetus was that when the Ag Committee was putting together their recommendations, one thing they said was, hey, there ought to be something, helping foster agrivoltaics in the solar law. And we did a little bit on sheep grazing but it was like at its infancy at the time. And I'm looking at Barb because she was on the committee at the time that we drafted this law, as was Will. About a year or two after we passed the law, I had a meeting with Mark and a few engineering consultants and some people from city or town of Ithaca, because there were some concerns about erosion and that we weren't doing enough to protect things. Of course, they're very worried about 6 Mile Creek and the reservoir and everything.
With regard to the solar or the agrivoltaic?
No, this had to particularly about the solar law in general.
Okay.
And we got in this discussion back and forth. At any rate, I will dig up some old notes and see if there's anything, because they recommended various things. I looked and said, but we do that. So there may be some things, but at any rate, they said, and I think this is worth looking into, that based on experience now, because, what is in there from like the NYSERDA and hasn't been adequate in terms of erosion protection. And so I think it's worth looking at because there may have been some evolution in thinking. They said based on practice of how things actually are taking place, we think more should happen. So that we will probably look at that question. When we passed this law, we had a certain set of penalties in it. We passed a battery storage law with exactly the same penalties in it, and Guy Crow, our lawyer, flagged those as inappropriate. And I think he just missed it in this law. So we'll probably go back and revisit how the penalties are phrased and do that. And the last topic we may look at, because it kind of flagged by the Ag Committee, was the idea of we do not draw a distinction of whether the power is being generated just for use on site or commercially, like for sale. And the planning board made a conscious choice that if you're covering a couple acres of land, it doesn't matter where you're sending the power. The Ag Committee expressed concern saying, hey, but if you're building it on a farm and you want to encourage farms to do this, now you're putting bigger restrictions on them because more things apply. So I'm willing to look at that question again. But I will announce right here, I'm not all that flexible on the topic, but I'm willing to look at it. So those are all things that I can be aware of. Erosion stuff, agrivoltaics, penalties, and the distinction of commercial versus non-commercial generation are likely topics, and maybe anything else anyone's thought of.
And penalties for what?
So violations. So
Violation of what?
okay, so there's various things that can be in violation of. So during construction, they're supposed to do certain things to protect this, that, or the other, or whatever. So erosion, or maybe a species, or whatever. So if they're not doing that properly, during operation, they're supposed to maintain certain safety logs. So there's various requirements in the law that could be violations, or they could be storing stuff on the site and not to be storing on the site. So there are various things that could be that. Anyway, so that brings me to the general summary. Okay, so I sent this to you. This is I'm not going to talk again. So the law has 3 big pieces. There's one which is like if you're a small home system, you have to fill a permit. That's it. then you're kind of a medium-sized system, and we ask, there's various things, kind of like site plan review that get involved in there. And then you're a big system, you got a lot you have to provide to make sure, that it's going to go okay. And in general, there is language protective of farmland. But also we want to allow it on farmland because the whole point is, this is seen as something that can be beneficial to farms, to have at least some of the land for solar development and help keep the farm going. So we didn't want to prevent it on farmland. So there was a bit of a balancing act there. So those are all the main pieces in the law, and we will delve into them. But there is like what you do during the construction phase and the operation phase and the decommissioning phase. And I think that's one thing I picked up on, that, on decommissioning, soil is supposed to be decompacted, for example. And folks are pointing out, well, those protections should happen during construction. Because it's hard to remediate that afterward. And so, so things like that we are what things people are bringing up now. So that's how the law is structured. So for agrivoltaics, that could mean changes either in the basic design. So there are what we call sort of design requirements, so that they could be added there. They could make some changes to the operation requirements. So we'll have to figure out where things might plug in. And so I think we will move on. And if there's any other general questions about the law as it exists, I'll move on to talking about the summit that I went to.
So, and maybe this is the summit you went to, but where are the, where do we find the most reliable expertise on agrivoltaics?
Yeah. So yes, I think that Cornell Cooperative Extension is what we're going to probably lean most heavily.
Okay.
And
are there publications that they have out, or do you know where?
So there's a guy there, Guillermo Metz. I don't know if we've heard that name. So he's sort of their guy on this, and he has been for years.
Okay.
And so I think he has a wealth of knowledge. And whether they put out any technical bulletins or anything, I don't know.
Okay.
It is a field that's evolving, and
Yeah.
so I think that'd be worth, finding out from him if you have written stuff. We'll also certainly talk to Caleb Scott, who is a Caroline resident, entrepreneur, and one of his main businesses is doing agrivoltaics around the country. And as I'll probably say again on the presentation, he's a big sheep guy. So he's very enthusiastic about sheep. But there's more to this than sheep, and he will talk about some of that too. But you get him talking, he's just glowing about sheep. So, yeah.
Can you send me a link or a copy of the current law?
Yeah, I did actually send, I think, you a copy of the current solar law in the email, and I also, it's on the town website, and no worries. And I did in the text mention. So just so you know, on the town website, at the top, there's a bunch of tabs, and one of them says documents. Yeah. So but just in general, on the town website, you go under documents, one of them says local laws.
Yeah.
Click on local laws, it takes your page, and they're grouped. And one of them is land use laws, and almost everything we deal with will be in our land use laws. So in general, you can get to town laws that way. All right. So, and actually, Irene was here to see this presentation. I don't know what happened to her. That was the whole reason she was coming.
Oh.
But that's up there. She's back. Good. Irene, I'm about to start the presentation. Maybe you're just listening in the background. We can't hear you. You're muted. And if you want to unmute yourself, that's fine. No.
Can't hear you.
Cannot hear you. There we go.
Yeah, I'll pipe in if I have any questions, but.
Okay.
But so far, this is just what I'm here for, so it's good.
All right, here we go. Good.
Dinner.
All right. So hopefully you guys are seeing the beginning of this, and if I go there, come on. All right, so Irene and Michelle, I can't see you guys anymore, but can you see a slide that says agrivoltaics?
Yes.
All right, here we go. Okay, so agrivoltaics, and again, so first off, this summit was back in March 26th. So it's been this talk has been put off a while. And so I'm a little rusty on that. And then I made the presentation for our last meeting and we pushed it off, so I'm even rustier on things. So this is not a smooth, well-polished anything, but there was this one-day event put on by the Agricultural and Farmland Protection Board. And as that sort of gives you a hint, I think that a lot of this agrivoltaic is, being promoted as a way to help save farmland in New York State.
Bill,
Yes.
Can you click that box that says always use subtitles? Click the X on that so that we're not looking at that and maybe your slide.
That's interesting because I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't have a box that says always use subtitles.
Can
That's
you
weird.
click it?
Do you see it, Michelle?
I see it.
Well,
We also see the list of slides on the left, which you could get
Okay,
out.
you should be seeing, because all I see is my blank, because I'm doing, a slideshow and I'm sharing the screen, so you must have.
So you want to share the presentation on the screen?
Yeah, all right, so I'm gonna stop this. Oh my God.
Yeah, share the presentation of the screen.
All right, so I'm gonna start. Okay, I'm starting at the beginning. All right, so if I do share.
Share the presentation.
Yeah, so where's I see this is my thing, and this is just the folder that does nothing, I think.
Yeah.
So what,
Yeah,
that's what I shared last time.
yeah.
I do this. Now my
And do you not see where it says always use subtitles?
I'm looking.
It's like the right-hand corner of the page says always use subtitles. Do you see just the slide and nothing else?
But when I start the presentation, when I start the slideshow, all that shows on the screen here is the slide.
Okay, it didn't show me. I never saw you start the slideshow. I could see the slides changing from the title slide to the one that said agrivoltaics.
Yeah,
But
it
it
sounds like it's not really sharing it then to you guys, which is weird.
Yeah,
Let me see well, we may have to. Live with this. I have no idea.
It's just a little distracting, we can see the slide. It's just that that box is taking up like a quarter of the screen.
well, yeah, and the list of slides on the other side, so it makes it
Yep.
very hard to read your actual.
Right, your actual information is like only half the screen.
Is this any different?
Oh, yes.
All right,
Except it
all
just says,
right,
yeah.
great. Okay, so that was it because it was in with something called presenter mode, and anyway, so it didn't share the same way in our screen as it was sharing for you guys. All right, now of course I do still have this screen sharing thing up there, but all right. So
That's better.
yeah, so there you go. So as the name says, it's agriculture and photovoltaics. So it's a simultaneous use of land for doing both. And that's the narrowest definition, and it's with a NYSERDA definition. And of course, they say it has to meet, all things are defined, like crops are defined, livestock is defined, et cetera. But there's no real accepted definition of agrivoltaics, and some folks have written sort of more expansive definitions of what it should mean to mean agrivoltaics. And so I'll share the one from the American Farmland Trust, which is a farmland protection organization nationwide. And they have a somewhat more farmer-oriented, farmer-centered definition. And so they add things like that the system should be intentionally planned and designed with agricultural producers. And that the production should start as soon as agronomically feasible and optimal from the operation date until decommissioned. So again, you can sort of see the change in focus. And the upshot of this is that the recommendation coming out was make sure you define what you mean by agrivoltaics in your law, whatever it's going to be, so that everyone knows what you're talking about. So So let's see, what else was I gonna say? So not surprising, there can be a few changes, right? Because you're gonna do both things, you've got to make both sides make some compromises. So the panels might be higher or more spread out than they would otherwise be, or whatever, or designed to what they call tabletop like this. They might normally be tilted in orientation, but they can go horizontal as shown in this picture, so a tractor can get underneath, that sort of stuff. So there are ways to design a system to make it easier to do farming. And you might get less agricultural yield because you got some shading or whatever, and you might get less photovoltaic production because you got more spread out or otherwise less optimal design. But the goal is you get more value of production combining the two out of the same acreage. That's one of the main goals. There are trade-offs, of course, because the higher panels giving the tractor clearance make things more visually impactful. In some communities, of course, try to limit how high these things get. Or you can put the panels further apart, which makes it better for the farmer, but at some point the developer says, I'm not getting enough panels in there, I can't do this project. So, it is always a section of a part of trade-offs, doing this and that and the other, and just working out an optimal design.
So do you know to what extent it occurs that the solar, the solar operator developer goes kicking and screaming into partnership with the farmer, or when agrivoltaics happens, it's typically done in partnership with the farmer?
Yeah. That's a great question. Caleb may be able to help answer some of that. What I can say, from his perspective, and I'll say this again later. What has to happen is vegetation management. That is, you have to keep the growth down.
Right.
And so that can be mowing, that can be herbicides, that can be grazing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's not uncommon for it to be grazing. And from the farmer perspective, this is great. Because otherwise you have to pay someone to let your sheep graze on their land. Right. Now someone's paying you to graze. So Caleb, that's why he's so excited that. In that case, the developer may not care that much because all you have to do is make sure the sheep can get in around the panels.
Yeah.
So that may be a happy situation. I think it's a little less happy when they have to make some real sacrifices in terms of production.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that if you say, that's good farmland, you can't build here unless, then making the project a go rather than going to some other suboptimal location, they might be okay. But I think that's an excellent question. It's something to explore with both Guillermo and Caleb.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, from the farmer perspective, there definitely are benefits. There's a dedicated stream of income, which helps keep the land in ag production. From a municipality and the country's perspective, there's renewable energy goals are better met because you have this, PV going on. There are some benefits in terms of the shading because if you're in an area that tends to be drier and that you can get a little bit of shade can help with moisture retention. And if it's not so much that you're cutting down on the solar input for the plants, then that's great. They also talked about frost protection, both in the spring and fall under the panels, a little less likely to frost, and so you can get a slightly extended growing season. All of this is out there, and I'll get to the research slide in a minute, but people are looking at all this stuff. I mean, people really don't know how to do this really well yet. It's what's being worked on. But Caleb put a slide up for some of the stuff he was talking about. We talked about, basically, again, the rotational grazing of sheep, right? Rotational grazing of sheep creates healthy roots in a rich, stable soil. But the grazed area is, again, open for birds and pollinators and whatever. So from a grazing perspective, there's a lot of benefit to doing that as opposed to just mowing it short all the time. And that there's, so NYSERDA has an RFP, request for proposals out, and maybe it's closed by now. Cornell College of Arts and Life Sciences is actively doing research as a group there, and Cornell Cooperative Extension is actively looking at questions. And so I think we could certainly certainly with uncooperative extension and maybe even reach out to the cows people. They are basically doing research on, yeah, what's a crop mix? What gets better yields? How do you optimize this, that, and the other, to do a good job of food production? All right. So things you have to think about, like I said, is like the spacing between the rows, the height of things, how much light's getting down. But things that are brought out is, again, I wouldn't have thought of this, so that for the farmer, again, these, you can, in some ways, it's not that expensive for the developer to say, oh, I can add a couple outlets here for you, where you can now plug in your electric fence or something like that. That's a very low cost add-on, whereas for the farmer to run the power out there was a big deal. So there can be some added value, as I say, from, either new wells or electrical stuff or animal shelter, the farmer can get some benefits from. But as they're pointing out in the last 2 points, again, when the site is designed, things are important, like, where the wires run, where are the cable trays, where the other stuff is, how much room do I have at the end of the row? Can I turn the tractor around? So there's a lot of things you need to think about when designing this stuff. Well-intended local laws can sometimes make it harder to do agrivoltaics. Again, there are reasons laws are written the way they were, but it's important to look at that and say, hey, do we really need to do it that way? So again, big one is the height. We don't want them above X feet. Well, if that means you can't raise them up enough to get a tractor under, but doing it 3 more feet would, look at that sort of trade-off. There's always buffers and setbacks from property boundaries. And if you make those too big in a solar law, which I think we did not, that can make projects just not feasible. We required, for example, fencing, and it's generally considered a good idea, but the point was, if you're putting the panels up high enough for tractors to get under, then it's really hard maybe for animals or people to do whatever that might injure themselves on them. So maybe you don't need to require fencing, and that's a reduced cost. Yes, we don't want on the best farmland, but if you do too much of that.
Farmers already have fencing. That's the other thing to think about. Like, I know we do, but other farmers as well, even if it's not the same type of fence, they have some sort of fencing.
Right. So if most of it is fenced anyway, why mandate a little fence inside it?
A fence inside a fence, right?
Yeah.
What's the goal?
So, again, when you draft the law, you aren't necessarily thinking of that. And so, and yeah, again, some laws say you can't be on the best farmland. Well, okay, but if a farmer only has great farmland and you can't let them use 10% of that, so again, looking at those sort of things, to make sure that the law is not unintentionally preventing something like an agrivoltaic installation. Again, there's another Caleb thing, slide. So again, if you forge into this, if the developer forges into just doing the thing without thinking about the farming end, then it may make it more difficult with the farming. So again, during the construction phase, can you keep on doing farming or not? Well, it's appropriate planning. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. If the farmer has unreasonable expectations of what things are going to be, or the developer does, I've got my animals here, you're running on your equipment here, so let's think through how we're going to keep the animals safe while this is going on. All that sort of stuff. So, again, not doing it without thinking can be a problem, but if you think carefully about it, have appropriate regulations in a law, then hopefully that will work. One thing Kev brought up a couple of times, and I know this was a question with the recent development that was going in that they're calling Yellow Barn, is a lot of farmers, of course, have an ag exemption. And if you then have a solar array on it, it's often reclassified as industrial use, which loses the ag exemption. And so that may be a state level issue, but it's something to address, because that ag exemption is a valuable part of keeping farms in business. And if they suddenly lose it, then that.
Well, it's becoming less and less valuable these days.
All right, let's see what else we have. Yeah, I already mentioned the decompaction, at the start rather than at the end. So like you know, it was also pointed out, you know, some farm uses are incompatible with panels. And so like, for example, they don't like insecticides and herbicides sprayed around panels. So again, again, there have to be some considerations and trade-offs on that sort of stuff. All right. So yeah, so again, you have to think about things. So I'm not sure if that's a cableway or a gear shaft that rotates the panels, but if you're the farmer trying to drive down there and you suddenly hit this barrier there, so you have to think through how this is going to be done. Turning radius at the end of the row, you know, making sure there's enough road, you know, might be fine for a lawnmower, but not for a tractor with a bunch of stuff on it. And you know, again, the things may be buried, but not buried deep enough. Then when you're plowing, you know, that could be an issue. So, the College of Arts and Life Sciences group has developed a safety protocol and training. They had to do it because they were having a terrible time getting any research done because nobody would let them go on there and do research until they could prove it to be safe. And, you know, things can happen. Again, you got wires there and it's running through a field because of the panels and you put the dump truck up, there you go. So the woman from Cows was talking about the fact that they had to go through a bunch of work to figure out how to do it safely. And they've now got the safety training course that's available for, you know, anyone, I think, to access or use, and they do trainings. So, but obviously still there's liability issues. Again, if you're the farmer trying to graze your animals and then something happens to your livestock because of the photovoltaics, again, there's just issues to be addressed. I think people are just starting to really think about. And power lines, I think it's not a surprise that basically, you know, where there's three-phase power lines is what sort of drives where development takes place. And the addendum that they have to be three-phase lines with capacity, or as happened in Caroline, they can be upgraded, but that's a cost. So preferentially a three-phase line with capacity. What Caleb was likely to bring up, and I really poo-pooing, it might be an interesting idea. You know, the town doesn't build three-phase power lines, right? But is there a way or somehow to like figure out a way to preferentially upgrade power lines that access marginal ag land? Because right now we got like one main one through the town of Caroline, or Irene will probably correct me, maybe there's two, but at any rate, you know, if we had, if we wanted to encourage agrivoltaics, one way any town could do it is to make sure that the power lines were available for that. But again, in general, municipalities don't do that. And I don't know if they should. I'm sure you'd have to do all kinds of applications to PSC. But at any rate, it may come up in discussion.
I wonder if there's a way that the solar power company can make a deal with the town in the planning. So like if there's not three-phase there, that they help pay for that cost.
Interesting question. That also somewhat gets into, yes, I'll call Irene in a second, because that may lead into also discussion of pilots, which I have as the very end of the thing, and it's actually coming up in a slide or two. But Irene, you have way more experience in this, so why don't you chip in?
Yeah, so three-phase lines are actually part of what's necessary. The other part is the capacity of the substation to handle
Right.
load. And right now, the way New York State handles that is any upgrades to the substation, and often but not always to the power lines, is on the developer to do. The state has been starting to allow utilities to plan in advance to put in three-phase lines where there are going to be solar developments or where they're desired. And in that case, then all the utility customers. So the way the utilities work is it's actually it's a form of socialism. Every utility customer pays for improvements, even if they're just happening in one place. So it's not that, you know, if they put a pipeline in Lansing, just Lansing pays for that pipeline. All of the NYSEG customers who are gas customers pay for that pipeline. And the same with upgrading or you know, developing transmission lines, three-phase lines that all of the utility customers pay for those improvements.
Right, in the rate they negotiate with, PSC, right?
Yeah, yep.
So, yeah, because I think that was what happened with the development here is that they were upgrading not just the lines, but the substation on Mid-Auto Road. I don't know if the project actually went through, that, I mean, it got approved. But I don't know if it's actually been built.
Yeah,
But-
well, I haven't seen any changes to the substation on Minot Road, but whether they're doing anything out in um, you know, Speedsville area where they look to do the solar development, I don't know.
So I know traditionally that it has been done by the developer, and that's exactly what was happening with the one project in Caroline. And I guess the question is, does it have to be that way? Is there anything, again, obviously an agreement could be reached with the developer, the town chips in some of the cost, that would be easy. Or as you're saying now, sometimes the utilities are being granted the ability to do that and then again, push the cost off onto us.
Yeah, it's easy and not easy because it's just enormously expensive. It's about $1 million a mile.
Yeah.
For, probably.
Of money.
It is a lot of money.
So, I mean, again, from a town's perspective, you have to decide, you maybe would look at the long-term benefit, perhaps, from having development in the town. Is it worth that? And, so. Let's see, so why are we not advancing anymore? Uh-oh, now we're too far. All right, so yeah, that brings us up to pilots, which was something we don't need to get into so much, it's more for the town board end, but it is quite common for many developments to do a payment in lieu of taxes as opposed to paying taxes on the land. And the issue with, so the solar development is that, so first off, state law says you can't charge more in a pilot than the taxes would be. So pilots are always less than the taxes. I think often, again, towns will do that in order to get a business to come. But what I wasn't aware of is that typically the pilots are often the pilots are set up so that they rise slowly. So at the end of the pilot period, now the developer or company, whatever, is paying the normal tax rate. Solar facilities have a problem, which is at the end of the lifetime, they actually aren't worth theoretically anything. Unless ongoing maintenance and replacement panels, otherwise you build this thing, 30 years from now, the panels go away, it's done, you decommissioned it, there's nothing left. So they're just a very different kind of creature as opposed to a company that's still there at the end of the pilot period. And I do know, I think that in Lansing, of course, with Milliken Station, they kept renegotiating the pilots. It wasn't like it just ended, they kept redoing it. But the gentleman that talked about this talked about they call the pilot cliff. So in a traditional pilot, the bar's on the left, you start off low at the beginning of the lifetime of the project. By the end, they're paying what would normally be the normal tax rate. With renewable projects or with the solar projects, one thing is there is no agreed upon valuation of the land for a solar development. It usually hasn't been enough history of them, they weren't sure. And this town's doing all kinds of different things. So NYSERDA stepped in and developed the valuation model for here's how you value these things. And then there was a court case and the court threw out the NYSERDA valuation model. And so we're back to the point of where we don't have much information on how to actually value that. So there's a question of, okay, you're paying less than the tax rate. We don't know what the tax rate would be actually. So there's a question, but at the end of the project, the value is zero. And so the money the town's been getting in this pilot at that, it's not like someone's now paying the normal tax rate. And so again, this is more for the town board. The guy's line was, don't pay for your lunch with grant money. That is, this is great while it's coming in, but you need to use that money not for ongoing expenses, but to build infrastructure that you can then keep reaping value from later on. Again, that's more of a town board thing. But otherwise, there's a big shock when that money goes away at the end of the lifetime of the project, and suddenly you've been using that to pay the budget, and you haven't been hiking your taxes, and suddenly you get a big gap. So that was his big point. So that's the main info that came out of that. Caleb had a slide with about 15,000 different possible policy issues. I'm gonna throw that up here. You know, that we'll look at a bit more. But again, I'm gonna want us to focus more specifically on what sort of things to put in terms of requirements on a photovoltaic, agrivoltaic system. But these are more policy issues that I don't know if we'll get to or not. In here somewhere is the thing about, you know, losing the ag exemption. But you know, he basically thinking how to incentivize this. These are some of his questions of how might you incentivize it. So, you know, should developer get an incentive for doing their project differently? That is, you know, if we're going to make it farm friendly, this is the question of are they dragging, kicking, and screaming? Can you give them you know, a bit of a benefit to make them more happy about that by whatever it is, either fewer regulations or a lower pilot or something, you know, for doing it that way. Do you make it mandatory that if you're doing it on an ag land, you gotta do this, or is it optional? You know, should DC use agrivoltaic land to reduce species lost? You know, beyond us, but anyway, he's a man with a lot of ideas, and so he'll bring them to us. So
did he say anything like, you know, like on that question of should states or towns mandate shared use, dual use? Does he say, yes, you know, like 10% of, you know, the existing agrivoltaic acreage was because the towns mandated, or, you know, I know of 2 towns that mandate. I mean, does he say that there are examples to each of these questions, or?
Worth asking, again, it's been long enough.
Yeah.
I don't want to give a definitive answer to that. I believe that someone like I'm doing, he sort of threw this up at the end of his talk.
Yeah.
And said, here's some other things to
Here's
think
some
about,
questions.
and I don't think he answered any of them, so, I would say.
Yeah.
So, anyway, so again, there are the things that go a bit beyond maybe the strict solar law, but and I think some of them start moving over into state policy questions as opposed to town policy questions. But all right, so that's pretty much what I came away with from that. Yeah, I'm gonna stop sharing and everybody's back. So, thoughts, comments, you know, that's just a little bit of background. Again, my intention is that we're gonna have Caleb in for a meeting to talk to us, and we'll get Guillermo Metz in to talk at least one time, and then we'll start delving into, you know, the nuts and bolts of the solar law. And Michelle or Irene, any questions or comments?
A question when you have Caleb in is, you know, I know that sheep are being promoted to kind of groom the growth under the panels. But at some point, you know, is there going to continue to be a market for sheep? You know, are they slaughtering them for food, or are they just growing them for wool? You know, either way, at some point, I would think it's a lot of sheep.
Well, and that has been the standard doc. He would say we could eat a lot more lamb.
Yeah.
And he's giving like per capita consumption of lamb in New Zealand versus you know, the US. But yes, I think that's the question. So agrivoltaics is more than grazing sheep. I mean, that's a real easy win-win, because again, the growth has to be kept on anyway. And I think that's exactly what it is. So pig grazing is another one though. So he calls them pasture pigs. So it doesn't have to be sheep. Now, I think pigs eat slop and stuff, but he seemed to think that that was, you know, a reasonable use of the land. I don't know if you have to do mechanical vegetation management too. But yes, that's a good question. And at some point we've got to do other stuff. So people looking at this are looking at, how do we grow crops too? How do we do, it can't just be sheep.
The ones I see that have been successful are crop farms.
Okay, so you've seen some.
Oh, online. Not in person, but yeah.
Yeah, and you know, I wonder both about what amount of sunlight gets under the panels to grow stuff, and also what amount of water gets under to, to nourish them also. They need both.
Well,
Yeah.
most solar panels are, they're out in the elements, they're okay with the rain and they're built for that sort of hurricane
But there might be
proof.
a dry spot underneath the panel, I think is what Irene's getting to,
Oh.
or what. So, yeah, so all those questions came up at the symposium. I don't remember all the answers, Irene. But that's indeed when you get into a bit of, how far apart are the panels because of how much shading you get and the tilt of the panels and can you change things during a storm or not during a storm and how you otherwise.
Some panels
do you
actually
give
let
them-
light through.
Yeah, do you give some breaks between them to make sure rain gets through within the soup stand? So all those are questions that are under active research, I believe, as to what's the optimal, design, and it may depend on the crop. So yeah, those are good questions. And some folks are trying to answer them. But I don't think we have answers yet.
Yeah, and I wonder to what extent is our agrivoltaics really ready for prime time, or is it still just in kind of a research phase?
Yeah, and I think that's what we're gonna try to find out.
Yeah. I mean, other than the sheep grazing thing.
I think, farming is still in the research phase. So, farming hasn't been worked out. Every farmer does it differently. At what crops they grow, what machinery they use, do they do drip irrigation or no irrigation? So, I think I wouldn't want to just not support agrivoltaics because it's new and is done multiple different ways in different situations and we don't have infinite research on quote unquote optimal because even when you take straight farming research from institutions like Cornell, there are farmers, including this one, who sometimes disagree with the optimal way of doing it because you know what, you might just hate black plastic and black plastic's not for your farm. But the research, recommends it. So I wouldn't dismiss it just because it's new and there still is ongoing research. I think ongoing research is good. I think we can always update laws as new research comes out, but I don't think we should hold off on supporting it.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that we hold off on supporting it at all, but just wondering, practically speaking, how is it just going to be about sheep for now? That's a way of developing the law one way, whereas if it's you want to have it to have clearance for tractors or things may need to change over time. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that's what I think we're going to have to learn a bit about is how much things mature enough and understand things will change and also understand that no matter what, there's likely to be in the wording of encouragements as opposed to requirements.
Yeah.
But it also could be that, okay, if you're on, again, the best farmland in Carolina, we will require some of this, but to be determined.
Yeah, and so that's going on with the Yellow Barn proposal is I think there's been some discussion about how much of it should be or will be dedicated to agrivoltaics as opposed to just straight solar. And so that might be the kind of thing that you want to.
Okay, great. Yeah, I knew that there was some questions that were raised about that during, the hearing, so.
Yeah, and I think there's still ongoing negotiations as to, some of it being research-based agrivoltaics and some of it being just, sheep graze agrivoltaics, but I believe that the community wants to see some proportion of it be agrivoltaics.
Oh, great. Anything else? Okay, great. So I think the next step, I'm not sure, is probably to get one of those guys in here, but we may need to know more first, so I gotta think a little bit about that. Also we should think about a next meeting, but at the very least, what I'd want to do is maybe again, if Coordination had some written materials, I can get them from Guillermo and we could all take a look at some of that. So I'll reach out to him to see if there is stuff like that. But our next meeting is gonna be a problem, for me at least. This is the year of trips for me, so, get the calendar out. So I'm gonna be gone the last half of, August. The last 2 weeks of August, I think, which is there. Yeah, roughly the last 2 weeks. So we'd either have to decide to meet in the second week of August, like the 11th or 15th, or skip the meeting entirely, meet at the end of September, or shift to meeting in the first half of the month and meet somewhere in the first half of September, giving us about 6 weeks from now. So I'm open to all those ideas. With the information that I will also be gone the last half of October into the first week of November. And then after that, we get to like Thanksgiving, which is at the end of the, so I'm going to suggest maybe we think about meeting earlier in the month, as long as we can avoid issues with the use of the town hall. But yeah.
Do you have dates in mind you want us to look?
Well, I'm not looking at this. Okay, so can someone pull up the town calendar? I would say that
Are you gonna do that, Brad?
Yeah, working on it.
Okay.
because this is 1, 2. Yeah, no. Yeah, I think I better say not to no to August. I think I could probably meet. If we want to do a meeting in August, I could meet anytime the 11th through the 14th.
What about Tuesday the 12th?
That works for me. There's nothing there's no board meeting, no.
Yeah, I could do Tuesday, 12.
So the town calendar is open.
It says watershed committee
Okay,
on Tuesday the 12th,
what time?
4 o'clock.
Okay, so they'd be done by evening.
Yeah.
Michelle, does Tuesday, August 12th work for you?
Yeah, it works for me.
Okay, so let's do that, and if I can't get a hold of some materials quickly so that we can look at for the meeting, then we may wind up canceling that meeting. But that would be the plan, is that if we have something to do, we'll have the meeting.
I can do some digging too.
Okay, that'd be great, yeah, that'd be awesome. Thank you. Okay, so I think that's.
If you wanna look at September too.
Oh, okay, we can look at, well, I guess we might as well, sure, let's look at September too. What do I have in September? Should probably double check that. Okay, that's fine. So the corresponding is like the second week of September. Would be the 9th or 10th. 9th would be a Tuesday, or the 16th. Either one of those works for me.
I can not do the second week of September. I can do the 16th, but I'm out the 9th.
Okay,
No, 16th looks fine with me.
okay. Tuesday, September. And Michelle, you look okay on the 16th of September? Or your visit question in August?
I don't have anything in September so far. So.
Okay. And again, the town calendar looks open that night. Okay, we'll do that, a little bit of advanced planning.
Yep.
Good.
Cool.
Okay, great. Thank you all.
Thank you.